So what is product compliance? One of the very interesting conversations we had when they reached out to me was, oh, I mean, they wanted to have a compliance expert and stuff in the bio and all that. But I am very wary of referring to myself as that because I believe compliance is very wide. I mean, I work on a subset of compliance, even though I still feel like I expand. I mean, it's a bit expansive in some way. For instance, I do anti-financial crimes. Inside anti-financial crimes, you know how Charlie Poppy said, inside your AVI, you find AVI inside, right? Inside anti-financial crimes, you find anti-bribery and corruption, you find fraud, you find sanctions, you find a whole lot of things inside just that one, right? Even fraud alone, if you have to go deeper, you find specializations inside it. So compliance can be really wide, right? But product compliance also can be quite wide depending on which areas you're working on. But you find that it draws on some key elements of some of these legal and regulatory standards. So I did a Google search and I mean, I wanted to know, okay, what are the different attempts at defining this? But I'm not going to bore you with what all the different attempts that people have made. So I tried to extract like something that strikes a balance amongst all these definitions, right? Due diligence measures aimed at ensuring that a product continually meets the required business, industry, legal, and regulatory standards. We'll get to our myth busters very soon, but you find here that I highlighted the terms, I mean, I mentioned the terms business and industry standard. A lot of people believe that compliance applies only to laws and regulations, but it's much wider than that, right? And we'll get there very shortly. So something I would like to say before we go too far is that if at any point you have any questions, please feel free to stop me. I want us to have a very interactive class, but I'm looking for how best to implement that. I don't know. I think later I'll start to call people one by one because I want to also learn from your experiences really. So I want it to be interactive so that you could ask your questions based on your own specific context, and I can also shed some light based on my own experience. So this infographic, sorry it's pixelated, but it covers most of those requirements that you find as, I mean, essential to building your product compliance program, right? So you see laws, policies. This is often overlooked, but your internal policies also apply to what kind of product you're going to be building, right? Your product should meet a certain standard. So you see standards here. There are international standards for certain kinds of products. For instance, if you are building an international money transfer product, there is an international standard that requires you to build or at least integrate some level of SWIFT messaging system in that product, such that those transfers, I mean, you guys are product managers, you understand that payment is first a message. So that message you're sending across to the receiving institution should also include information on the sender and the beneficiary. That is for even traditional finance. When you come to crypto, there's something we call the travel rule. You understand from crypto that there's an international standard for what that travel rule tool must meet. There's a messaging standard because your message should be readable by the entity that will be collecting it, by the bank or financial institutions that will be collecting the money on the other end. So those are like, I mean, even though it is not a law, it is an international standard that applies to the kind of products that we are building. So there are a lot of them. The ISO 27001 standard is also another standard that is very important in, I mean, in the information technology world that we currently operate in now. Nobody will really take you seriously, say as a financial infrastructure service provider, if you do not have the ISO 27001 certification, for instance, because they want to have that guarantee that you are maintaining the highest level of information security standard in your processes, in your systems, in the way you handle data, and a lot of other things. It's a very serious thing, really. You have regulations, you have transparency requirements. Don't worry, we'll touch on some of these elements as we proceed in this training. So yeah, this speaks to what I was talking about earlier. Compliance is quite wide. You see insider compliance, you find financial crimes, you find privacy and information security. Even within that privacy and information security, you find people that specialize only in data protection, you find those that specialize in information security, right? You find tax as well, and a lot of other a lot of other items that could really fall inside the compliance bucket. Financial crimes compliance, because fraudsters love fintech. I don't know if you're aware, but during the last Ramadan break, because I mean, anti-financial crimes professionals to talk in some kind of way. I don't think it's enough, but we talk. During that last Ramadan, that Salah, right? There was almost like a targeted attack at a number of fintechs in Nigeria, and the approach was they wanted to use their referral system to break the system. So a lot of people lost money because people were, I don't know how they got hold of as many BVNs as they had, but you just find out that you had the spike in signups on Salah, and you just found out that it was just pretty much empty accounts, and all they were just using those accounts to do were um, to collect your referral bonus or whatever it is. I know a company that lost just within how many minutes, 500,000, right? I mean, it could be small, but maybe because they're a startup. But imagine that on a large scale, like in a kind of flutter wave, that's a lot of money that they could potentially lose, right? And a whole lot of other fraud stories in fintech today. Compliance is there to manage those incidents, prevent them from happening, and when they happen, to manage them as well. Privacy and information security, I believe this speaks for itself. Tax is also something that is getting some significance lately. I don't know. I think later on during this training, I'll also ask, I mean, some places that you guys are working, you may not disclose the name, just let me know the industry, right? But one of the things that I would likely see in a few weeks to come is that the Federal Inland Revenue Service will be introducing an application programming interface system. I don't know if any of you work in a bank, but some banks would have gotten that notice already from the FIRS. Some crypto companies too would have gotten that as well. You need to integrate an API now from the FIRS to track your financial flows and to automatically remit the tax, right? It's new, it's innovation, right? But if you're not aware of it, you'll just be building, and then by the time it's time to remit taxes, you're there in a limbo, right? So that's something that you should probably keep an eye on. I'm giving you guys expo. Right. So let's go to the next item. Sorry, I'm coming. So a couple of these things feed into the compliance program. I've highlighted some of them here, and I just gave like one-liner definitions. What are laws, rules set by authorities, pretty much the National Assembly or the local assemblies. I don't want to get into law here to regulate behavior, really. Standards are agreed upon norms for quality and performance. Policies are internal rules and regulations, really, that govern how your organization develops certain kind of products, how you handle certain kind of data. Some policies could be like a laptop use policy, data protection policy, network segregation policy, a whole lot of policies. You're going to be encountering a whole lot of policies depending on how developed your startup is. You might even be involved in the drafting of some of these policies, but some of those policies speak to your development process, especially policies like secure development guidelines, guidelines for working in secure environments, and a couple of other policies that are recommended under the ISO 27001 standard. For instance, let's say secure development guidelines. In that policy, you are supposed to segregate your networks, right? So your live environment is supposed to be different from your test environment. If you don't have that already, you are already breaking two things. You're breaking your internal policy and you're breaking the ISO standard, right? So those are some of the ways these things feed into your product compliance framework. Contracts. This is very important because a lot of people feel like it's just laws, right? But if you're a B2B product, for instance, you would have agreements, you have SLAs with your partners where you are supposed to meet a certain availability threshold. In the US, there's a slang they call it among lawyers there. They call it the 5 nines, 99.999, right? In Nigeria, the CBN recommends 97% availability. If you look at the open banking operational guidelines, right? If you don't meet that guideline, you're already breaking an agreed term in the contract that could have some repercussions. We'll get to repercussions